topics on history as well as literature. And our speakers for the day include Miss Bryony Ranasinghe, Miss Amanti Pusapitiya, Miss Supun Ekanayaka. And like yesterday, at the end of the first session, we will have a 10 minutes break leading up to 3 other sessions that include a very important session on question and answers. Like yesterday, you will be able to ask your questions at the end of the second day as well. So kindly note down whatever concerns that you may have related to what is presented here or anything general even, so that use this session so that you could use this session as a kind of opportunity to reassess your own selves in terms of where you're at right now, just before the advanced level examination. As I mentioned yesterday, it's an important juncture for you. It's a stepping stone to your next stage of your student life. So make the most of this opportunity. And like yesterday, Professor Chandima Wickramasinghe will have a closing session, and she will close the session with her final remarks today after the Q&A session. So without further ado, I cordially invite Ms. Amanti Pusapitiya to proceed with the rest of the sessions for the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Okay, so we'll then move on to the first session of the day, which is Gracchi Brothers and Agrarian Reforms by Miss Bryony Ranasinghe. Bryony, over to you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So I will be starting the session of today with the Gracchi Brothers. 1 minute. Okay. So we will be starting, as we said, with Gracchi Brothers and Agrarian Reforms. So first, to give you a little background and context to the situation that actually led to the agrarian reforms, is that this is happening in the years after the Punic Wars, which you all had a session about yesterday. So what happens with the Punic Wars, as you all remember, is that there is a growth of the Roman Empire. And so with the growth of the Roman Empire, they get a lot of land. And instead of this land actually being part or given to all citizens, it actually starts going just to like the senatorial class, the patricians. And so they began to grow like large scale farms. So it's kind of a situation where there is like a huge plantation and nothing else, basically. Kind of similar to feudal systems, but without serfs working on the land. Instead, what happens is, again, as a result of the wars, there's a huge slave population as well. And these slaves are basically cheap labor. So they are the ones who work the lands of the Roman. So the Roman people, the plebeians, do not actually have access to land, and they can't grow their farms. In addition, during the wars, like for instance, when Hannibal invades Italy, there is a situation where he starts burning crops. And so he devastates farmland as well. So those people also lose land in that way. And it's again mostly plebeians who lose their land. And so with that, we also have another issue where there is still continuous wars happening during the time between the Punic Wars and the arrival of the Gracchi. And for these wars, as you know, conscription is used for the Roman army. And so the main force of the Romans are basically military. And the military, what happens is that they had to supply their own armor, their own kits, their own weapons, whatever. And so because of that, they actually leave behind their farm, they sell their farms in order to get the money to actually go to war, because they don't have another way of doing so. And so all this combines to basically make a situation where the rich are getting richer because they have the farms and they have the public land. And so they have and they have cheap slave labor, and the poor are getting poorer. And so what happens when the poor keep getting poor is that they start migrating towards the cities, especially Rome in this situation. It's a similar situation that we find in the Industrial Revolution, with the growth of industries and easier production. All the homegrown manufacturing processes stop and people start migrating to cities for jobs or whatever. And so there's a huge population of disgruntled poor within the city of Rome itself. So into this situation come the Gracchi brothers. So the Gracchi are actually patricians, and they are wealthy from a wealthy family because they are the grandsons of Scipio Africanus. And Scipio Africanus, as we all know, was the hero of the Punic War. So Tiberius Gracchus, for instance, was a quaestor in the army. And when he returns to Rome, apparently this is a story, we are not sure about how true it is, but he comes through the fertile lands of Etruria, which is part of the western province of Rome, of Italy. And what he sees is that there is large farms with slaves working in them, rather than people or small tiny farms worked by the citizens of Rome itself. And so he wants to rectify this injustice, and he gets himself elected as tribune in 133 BC rather. And he immediately starts reforming, land reform. So the agrarian reforms. So what he does is he actually puts into force an existing law in Rome that nobody really bothered to care about. And that is to limit the size of public lands, or agere publicus, that people gain through war to 500 jugera per citizen. So that is roughly equal to about 300 acres in modern day terms, and it's a sizable proportion. So that is what he starts doing. And to do this, to make sure it's done properly, he also appoints a land commission to see how much of land each citizen actually holds, and to confiscate land if it's exceeding the amount, or if it's or if they have got it like through false means or things like that. And what he does with the confiscated land is, his plan is to redistribute it to the poor citizens of Rome, and so they can have land to farm. So in order to do this, he puts the proposal to the Senate, and the Senate refuses, obviously, for some reasons that we are not sure of. And as a tribune, what he can do is he can bring laws directly to the public assembly, which is where all people of Rome are there, particularly the plebeians. And the plebeians allow this law to function, right? It passes through them. And so the plebeians, but as we remember, if you remember the rights of tribunes properly, they also have the power of veto. And his fellow tribune, Marcus Octavius, backed by the Senate, tries to veto this law. And that's when Tiberius starts acting a little unconstitutionally, and he gets rid of the tribune, which is not allowed, and he appoints another and passes the law. So he brings into fruition a land commission to make sure that the lands could be limited and that a redistribution can happen. And into this commission, it's himself, his father-in-law, and his brother. When he appoints the land commission, the Senate has to fund it, basically, to make sure that it works properly. And the Senate refuses to kind of allow a lot of funding. And what happens then is that the king Attila of, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, so just remember his name is, but just remember that he's the king of Pergamon, which is an ally of Rome. And so this king dies, and he comes back, and his envoys come to Rome, because when he dies without heirs. And so there needs to be someone to basically look after, and he bequeaths it all to Rome. And so he uses the treasury of this deceased king of Pergamon, which is probably a very rich kingdom, to fund his land commission. And he passes this motion or law allow him in to do so to the assembly of the public or the plebeians. So, and of course, the Senate gets really angry. And what happens is that when he tries to get re-elected as tribune for the next year, they basically kill him and about 300 of his followers. So, but the main importance here is, of course, the land commission. And it actually does not get disbanded after his death. So at times when there is limited funding available, it actually functions. So in 129 BC, for instance, it's functioned where they try to bring Italian lands also under it, or in 125 and 129. So, and then at other times it doesn't function. And for about a period of 10 years, there is a little bit of an uneasy situation in Rome because of the violence of what happened to Tiberius. But of course, nothing boils over. And then we have Tiberius's younger brother, Gaius, who also wants to continue his brother's work. Now, when we compare the two brothers, what we can see is that Tiberius is more of an idealistic reformer, because what he wants to do is he wants to make the people's lives great through land only, like he was limited in that scope. And Gaius was like a socialist reformer. He wanted to make a huge, wide sweeping of social change, right? And so Gaius becomes elected as tribune in 123 BC. And he immediately starts putting his brother's proposals again into effect. So the biggest proposal that he does is the lex frumentaria. So lex is law and frumentaria is of or related to corn. So basically it's a corn law. And what this law does is it provides grain to citizens at a subsidized price. So basically what it means is every citizen gets grain at, say, what we would in modern day terms think of, if I'm using a modern example. So every farmer in Sri Lanka would get grain for like 10 rupees. That's the price. So it basically controls the market price. It can't be sold to citizens at a higher price, basically. And so that's so that nobody will, have enough money to buy too much grain and leave nothing for the rest. And it also means that everyone is able to buy grain. And this is like the biggest law that Gaius puts. In addition to that, he also redoes his brother's law of redistribution of the ager publicus, or the public land, to the poor. So he does it in a different way though, because for him also, though there is a land commission, he needs a proper way to fund it. He can't just rely on the treasury. And the way he funds it is he actually gives the middle class or the equites power in the provinces to increase state revenue, right? So it's easier if I think of it as a restructuring of the economic process of Rome. So because earlier the provinces were increasingly held by the senatorial class or the patrician. And now it's been given to this like middle class of businessmen, the equites, to oversee the provinces and the collection of revenue. And then there is also an office called a publicus, an officer who like has oversight over what is collected. And so whatever money is collected from this is what is actually given to fund